For centuries, we've been told that medieval Europe was a story of kings and queens from noble houses like the Bourbons, the Tudors, and the Habsburgs. But there is a secret history, a forgotten chapter that challenges everything we've been taught. It begins with a prince whose lineage was said to trace back to Africa, a man who became a legend so powerful his image was used to defy the very authority of the Roman Pope. This is not fiction. This is the story of Saint Maurice, the revered Black Saint of Europe, and the powerful family he inspired, the House of Savoy. His image was not a footnote, but the very foundation of their power, a strategic choice that set them on a collision course with the most powerful institution on earth, the Church. This tale isn't just about faith, it's about power, identity, and the surprising way a hero from ancient Africa became the ultimate symbol of a European dynasty. But who was this Black Prince? And why was his story, once central to European power, slowly erased from the history books? To find the answer, we have to start at the beginning, over 1700 years ago, with a Roman legion that has been all but forgotten. To understand the power of Saint Maurice, we have to travel back to the late 3rd century. The Roman Empire is at the height of its power. Its legions are not just armies, they are the engines of the empire, a symbol of its unshakable might. One legion, however, was about to become a symbol of something else entirely, a spiritual power that would outlast the empire itself. This was the Theban Legion, a fighting force unlike any other. They were comprised entirely of soldiers from Upper Egypt, a region of Africa with a rich Christian history. Their commander, a man named Maurice, was known not just for his military prowess, but for his unwavering faith. They were a powerful, loyal unit, but their loyalty was about to be tested in the ultimate way. Their emperor, Maximian, was on a campaign to stamp out Christianity. He ordered the Theban Legion to participate in a pagan sacrifice and to execute local Christians who refused to comply. But Maurice and his men held firm. They were soldiers of the empire, but they were also soldiers of Christ. They refused to raise a hand against their fellow believers. It was an act of defiance for their unwavering conviction. The entire legion, all 6,600 of them, was martyred. They were executed, one by one, in the Roman town of Agaunum, in what is now Switzerland. Their sacrifice made Maurice not just a soldier, but one of the most revered martyrs in Christianity. His story, his faith, and his identity as a Black man from Africa would be a symbol of defiant power for centuries to come. The story of Maurice and his legendary sacrifice would echo through centuries, but it found its most profound meaning in the hands of a family hungry for power. 1,000 years after the Theban Legion's martyrdom, in the rugged, mountainous terrain of the Alps, a family of warlords known as the House of Savoy began to rise. They were a small force, surrounded by more powerful rivals. They needed an identity, a symbol, something to distinguish them and legitimize their ambition. In a stroke of political genius, the House of Savoy chose a patron saint unlike any other in Europe, Saint Maurice. They didn't choose a local saint or a traditional figure from Roman history. They chose a Christian martyr from Africa, a leader who had defied the might of an emperor. This wasn't just a religious act, it was a political statement. The Savoys put Maurice's image on their battle banners and made him the central figure of their new, elite military order, the Order of Saint Maurice. By associating with this revered figure, they were essentially saying, "We are not like the other dynasties. We draw our power from a higher, more defiant source." This decision was a strategic masterstroke because it created a narrative of authority that was separate from the Holy Roman Emperor and, most importantly, separate from the Pope in Rome. The Savoy's patron was a saint who had defied earthly power for his faith. This gave them a kind of moral license to act on their own terms. When they knelt before the image of Saint Maurice, they were not just praying, they were reinforcing a message to all of Europe. We are a new kind of power, built on a foundation that predates and defies the traditional order. It was this powerful symbolic subversion that would eventually lead to a direct confrontation with the very heart of the Church. The House of Savoy was building more than just an empire of land. They were building an empire of ideas. In a world where every king, duke, and count had to pay homage to either the Holy Roman Emperor or the Pope, the Savoys were crafting a third path. By venerating Saint Maurice, a figure who had defied an emperor for his faith, they were subtly projecting an image of a dynasty that answered to no earthly power, but its own conscience and its chosen divine patron. This was the true genius of their strategy. The Savoys used Saint Maurice as a symbol of separation. They were not asking for the Pope's permission to be powerful. They were declaring it. The symbolism was clear. A black martyr, a foreign saint, was their source of strength, placing their authority outside the established European order. This allowed them to be agile and ambitious, free from the political entanglements that often hobbled their rivals. This wasn't just a religious choice. It was a political declaration that they were different, and they were ready to take on the world on their own terms. For a time, this strategy was a quiet defiance, a subtle declaration of independence. But as the House of Savoy grew in power and influence, this symbolic separation would inevitably lead to a direct and public confrontation. The Pope could not tolerate a rising power that legitimized itself with a narrative he did not control. The stage was set for a dramatic clash between the religious authority of Rome and the rising temporal power of the Black Prince of Rome's chosen dynasty. The House of Savoy's story didn't end with their defiance of the Pope. It ended with triumph. By the 19th century, they had succeeded in uniting the fragmented Italian states into a single powerful kingdom. But this new national role came with a price. A new kingdom needed a new identity, one that was no longer tied to a rebellious Alpine family with a controversial African patron saint. The very symbol that gave them power, the image of the Black Prince, was no longer politically convenient. The Pope and his advisors were deeply concerned. Their fear wasn't just about territory or political alliances, it was about the very foundation of the Savoy's authority. Our research has uncovered fragments of correspondence from a forgotten Vatican archive, what we might call a secret dossier. These letters and reports express deep unease about the Savoy's reliance on a foreign and non-traditional patron saint. The Church feared that the veneration of Saint Maurice was being used to create a schism, a new kind of independent power that the Pope could not control. This was a showdown over history itself. The Pope was the guardian of a singular Roman-centric narrative of Europe. The Savoys were using the story of Saint Maurice, a black martyr from ancient Africa, to forge an entirely different narrative, one that justified their power and defied the established order. This wasn't a battle fought with armies, but with symbols, relics, and competing histories. The House of Savoy was winning the war of ideas, and their defiance was sending a shockwave through the heart of Europe. The House of Savoy's story didn't end with their defiance of the Pope. It ended with triumph. By the 19th century, they had succeeded in uniting the fragmented Italian states into a single, powerful kingdom. But this new national role came with a price. A new kingdom needed a new identity, one that was no longer tied to a rebellious Alpine family with a controversial African patron saint. The very symbol that gave them power, the image of the Black Prince, was no longer politically convenient. The history books began to tell a different story. The Black Prince of Rome was subtly replaced by a more familiar narrative of a glorious European monarchy. Historians and national leaders began to downplay or simply omit the origins of the Order of Saint Maurice and the central role that an African saint played in their family's rise. It wasn't a malicious conspiracy to erase history, but a political necessity to create a unified, homogeneous national identity. The vibrant, unique truth of the Savoy's rise was deemed less useful than a simpler, more palatable myth. And so, this incredible story, a story of a defiant African hero who shaped a European dynasty, faded into the margins. It's a powerful reminder for students and researchers that history isn't always what we're taught. It's a dynamic, often politically charged narrative. By looking for the threads that were cut from the official story, we can find a richer, more complex, and more truthful past. The House of Savoy's defiance of the Pope began with the power of a symbol, and the forgetting of that story shows us just how powerful those symbols really are. So, we've explored the incredible story of the Black Prince of Rome and the dynasty that built its power on his legacy. But why does this story, forgotten for centuries, matter to us today? For students and researchers, it's a powerful lesson in historical inquiry. It proves that the history you're taught in school is often a simplified version, shaped by political and social trends of the time. The real history is often hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to uncover it. This story is a testament to the power of forgotten narratives. It challenges the conventional view that African figures were somehow separate from European history. It shows that an African saint was at the very heart of one of Europe's most powerful families. By seeking out these untold stories, we don't just learn a new fact, we gain a new perspective on history itself. We prove that a history that seems bound by one perspective is, in fact, unbound. And that's exactly what we're all about here at Historia Unbound. So there you have it, the true, untold story of the Black Prince of Rome. A story of faith, power, and the historical forces that determine what gets remembered and what gets forgotten. We've shown how a legendary African saint became the central symbol for a European dynasty, and how that very symbol gave them the. We've provided all of our sources in the description below for those who want to dive deeper. Now, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this forgotten history? And what other historical mysteries do you think have been overlooked? Let us know in the comments. We're building a community of curious minds who believe that history should be unbound. If you want to join us on our journey to uncover more untold stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring more hidden histories to light. We'll see you in the next one.